Hello and welcome to Leadership Within. I'm your host Vanessa, and with me is...
Myself, TK, hey.
Hey DK, how are you doing today?
I'm doing absolutely amazing. I had a vacation time last week, and yeah, full of energy. Well, not necessarily full, as you know, I spent some time at work, but I'm definitely having new ideas. So interested to have a good conversation.
Amazing. So what I thought we could talk about today is this notion of success and how we help people. So as leaders, how do we help individuals navigate the corporate ladder that no longer exists? You know, how do we help them get their needs met or support them when they're not able to get their needs met? Because actually the model with which they're kind of aspiring to no longer exists.
Oh, yeah, well, it's a big one. How can we help someone navigate something that doesn't exist? But maybe let's, how do we define and how do we help people be successful? But if it doesn't exist, the question is, how do we help them discover what success really means?
Exactly.
Do we know?
Yeah. Well, so I notice, and in full transparency, that I am having to rework my own version of this because
you're not the only one over here on this podcast.
Well, I've kind of noticed that, you know, for so long, I've just had this view about where I should be and how I would measure success in metrics or income or, you know, whatever it is. And it doesn't work. You know, it's just really hard. You know, I just feel like actually what I then do is turn that into a stick to beat myself with because I'm not where I should be. And what it doesn't recognize is that the nature of what I'm holding up is, you know, it's not the model necessarily for me. And so how can I flex, but also, you know, how can I hold it lightly so that I don't give myself such a hard time? But I know it's not just me. I know it's happening in the corporate world a lot.
It does, yeah. But the interesting thing is, like, you know, Vanessa, someone as conscious and reflective like yourself, like, what pushes you towards defining success? Not even chasing it, but,
God.
You know, yeah.
Well, if I'm being fully transparent, I have been working with a therapist around my self-esteem, and in particular, looking at how do I find joy at this stage in my life, because I turn everything into a bloody goal, and you know, I've got to achieve that, you know, like I've got to achieve it, and therefore it's no longer pleasurable or satisfying. And so I've kind of noticed that pattern that I'm wired for is really impacting me.
Thank you for your gift of honesty and openness, Vanessa. No. I really appreciate the fact that, you know, you decided to share this with me and our listeners. In fact, you know, the thing is, I feel that too, right? In a way that, you know, we seem to be, but in my own experience, I just seem to be surrounded with the pressure of goals and success and everything like that. Well, that's what we're supposed to do. So I'm doing it too. But more and more I've discovered, like, why is it that I really care? Like, you know, what is it that I really care about? And, you know, it's not an easy one because we're forced or, you know, molded by society, but everything that surrounds us in a certain mode, as in, you know, we're supposed to set ourselves the goal, otherwise we won't achieve anything. But what does it really mean? Where's the why?
Yeah, well, and I was thinking, the other reason for this was I had a conversation with someone this week, and what they were saying was they've always been a number two. They're a number two, and they want to be a number one, but you know, they're not sure if they can be a number one in a big organization, and therefore should I be a number one in a smaller organization? And absolutely, what is missing is the why. Like, what does it matter which number you are? Do you know what I mean? It's the conversation is led by the position, you know, like number one.
Well, I guess it's the way I think about it, that it's a simplification, that it's a mental model and it just feels like achieving. Well, before we
Yeah.
started recording, we've just talked about me learning piano and chords, right? So I feel joy when the next day my fingers are able to be on the right keys. When I practiced a lot and something happened. So it's like this small, the small joy we feel because we tell ourselves that this is something valuable. It might be regardless of what it is. We also, I guess, I myself get joy when others acknowledge my value, right? And many people have this external motivation. I mean, that's nothing strange. And I just feel like because we've been told this story and we've been repeating this over and over again, it just became true, right? We were supposed to be number one because, there's number one. And and not many people are willing to reflect. It's like, what does it really mean for them? Maybe there's a lot of work associated with it, a lot of responsibility, stress. It's like, why the hell? Do you really want that?
Yeah. Well, and it's the other thing to this is just I'm also noticing how many people really are wired at the moment because of the pace of change, but also the fact that they're trying to navigate between purpose and safety through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm noticing is like some people will say to themselves, it's fine that I work, 70 or whatever hours a week. You're just sitting there thinking, is it? Like, really? I find like having that conversation with people can be a bit confronting because, you're really kind of just saying, who's saying it's fine? Where's the evidence for that? How does that support where you're wanting to? Do you know what I mean? It's like
I do, and in fact, it gets into what's the meaning of life territory.
Yeah,
and but it's a good question actually. For me, the bigger challenge is how do we create the space for ourselves to have this kind of a conversation or this kind of reflection? Because by far, people are driven by these goals, by these stories that are often not their own. And it's just so hard to go against it or even think that it might be something different.
Yeah. Well, so, okay, let's go back to your piano thing then.
Yes.
What was the catalyst for you to decide right now at this moment you want to take up the piano?
Pure joy and bliss of learning something new and creativity. Look, I just thought, wow, that's so flippin' amazing. I've seen so many videos on YouTube of people playing live loops, and it just looks so amazing. I loved it. It's technical and artistic and creative. I want it in, and I feel joy, happy. I'm so giddy and everything, right? Sure, you can say I will get bored, fine, which I hope I won't, which is a different thing, right? So it's my own challenge is like, well, how do I keep it up? How do I finish the book that I've started? But that's another story I'm telling myself. So for me, it's like the joy that I'm learning something new, I'm acquiring a skill that I can then use to produce something interesting, right? Express myself. It's the same with this podcast. Quite recently, I've changed the software that I'm using to edit these episodes, and I've really enjoyed learning it.
So what would you say? I mean, I'm hearing lots of values, but what are your values underneath that?
Fun and happiness. Vanessa,
Aww.
Pure and simple, isn't it, right? The pure joy of learning another audio editing software or like learning all the knobs. I know it sounds
we are
strange.
so different. We are.
No, I think we are not because we're obviously very different, which makes these conversations quite great. But one thing is, I could ask you the same thing about your yoga lessons. What is it?
Yeah. Well, so I think my yoga one is an interesting one because as soon as I qualified, I then I felt myself lose motivation to actually then go and do the thing that I really enjoyed, which was teaching it, right?
Yes.
So I loved my exam because I had like people, real bodies in the room, and I saw how much, even really young people are really struggling with flexibility. And it just felt a really lovely communal space. And so I came away on this massive high. And then, like a week goes by, I'm really busy in work. And then I'm like, why did I even do this? Like, I'm never going to get to do that. I'm going to lose it all like I did before. And so my negative Nancy's taken hold, right? And then when I start to think about what do I do just for joy, I can't answer it. Because what I've done is I've then made yoga less about a value and more about, oh, I've got to run, I've got to teach, I've got to turn it into a career, a
Yeah,
thing.
that's the way to go, isn't it? Right? That's what you're
Well,
supposed
and
to
I do
do.
it with
You've
everything.
spent,
Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh God, I mean, my brain seems to just be very obsessed with coaching and turning things into, you know, a, a, a work thing. And actually, what I really want to do is is connect with people and have genuine conversations about our bodies, about aging, about flexibility, about supporting ourselves differently. And yet,
such a beautiful mission, isn't it?
yeah, but and yet I'm still bloody not doing it. Do you know what I mean? It's like because I think it has to be like a big bloody company. I mean, it's just stupid. It's nuts. Sometimes I do drive myself bats.
As you know what I always say, Vanessa, we should forgive ourselves. Come on.
You,
I think many of our listeners have thoughts like this. If they, whether it's music or, whatever you take on, and, it's not that I'm not having them, but the real thing is, if our wonderful listeners are listening to this conversation, which I hope they are, notice the fact that we're reflecting and digging into that ourselves. Like through this conversation, we're able to discover what is it that really matters. And I'm sure if we had the conversation a bit longer with Vanessa, I'm sure you will have it following this episode. You will discover what it really means for you, right? All these things are there. I don't mean the sense of achievement.
No, I think more than anything,
Nancy,
it's a grounding. It's a slowing down. It's a coming into my body. It's a getting out of my head. That's what yoga is for me. And it's funny because I've been thinking about how, when we're trained in coaching, when we were trained, we would often do the wheel of life and we would set goals around the wheel of life, in the very early days. And we might do something like future self, or we might say to people, where do you want to be in 5 years' time?
Classic tools, right? Yeah.
They're classic tools, but do those tools work for now? Like, are the questions the right questions? Or actually, is coaching needing to evolve into a different space?
Oh, that's an interesting rabbit hole. Which might be an episode in itself. But whether they work or they don't, which I think they have value. The question that is really interesting for me is if you are a leader and you're faced with this situation that you started the episode with, of someone like needing to navigate the non-existing ladder. How can you have the reflective space for the conversation that needs to happen for the person to really discover that?
Yeah, because if you meet them with that question of, so where do you want to go next? They haven't got a clue, and actually neither does the leader because they don't know what's possible, right?
Even if they're open to have this conversation at all.
Exactly. So like, how would we suggest leaders meet that differently?
So I have a way to practice it, which is like I'm leading by example. As we both did during this episode by being vulnerable and open. Like, look, I'm learning piano, or look, I'm struggling with this, and it just shows that reflection is possible. That this is the space for reflection. And many people, I'm working with someone that needs time. So I'm usually having a situation where we talk about something and then we have to meet like the next day or 2 days after, and they come in with great reflections because this is how they reflect. I'm often writing, right? It's just a question of how this space looks like. But the fact that we have this, the space exists, that we appreciate and, talk about reflections is an important thing. So I think it's just easy to say, oh, we need trust or, we need reflection, but it just needs to be shown. We need to show an example, lead by example, be there first to show that we can reflect, which they can also appreciate other people's reflections. So that's my way of doing it, but I'm sure you have something too.
Well, I think the thing that's standing out for me, I'm thinking of a particular example in mind where I know someone's needs are not being met in their work, And so that kind of takes me back to the whole idea of, can you as a leader help someone identify what their own needs are? So whether that's, gosh, I need some semblance of stability or security, or whether that's, I need to feel like I'm making a difference, or I need to feel like I belong to something and have some kind of significance. I think if we can help them figure that out, like what's the drivers behind you, then you might be able to say, and how else might you get those needs met?
Do you know what? As I want to say, a student of Nancy Klein and Time to Think, I would say that if people are genuinely interested with proper curiosity, like this is where our coaching experience and training comes in, this creates the space for that to happen. Now, there's an if that I started with. As a leader, the real question for you, dear listener, is to reflect if you really want them to discover their purpose, because their purpose might not be working for you or in this organization or whatever it is, right? Or spending God knows how many hours pushing the goals that you give them. And this might be a dangerous conversation. So, well, the first thing is to ask yourself if you want to really care about what they want to say. I hope we do. I mean, I really hope you do. But it's your answer to give. It's your reflection to have. And to be honest, it can lead to dangerous outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that you raise, and I think also I would also say that as individuals, we need to have sufficient awareness and agency of what really does light us up, of what really does matter, and almost like this awareness that life is short. Do you know what I mean? And that having some kind of presence approach to fulfillment or success, rather than when I get there, then it'll all be okay. So I think there's a responsibility. I think it's a yes and. I think the leaders need to have those conversations, but also I think individuals need to do the work to, and it is work. Like I'm finding it, like at my ripe old age, it's work to now go, oh, what would make me feel joy? Like, and it's not, and what I find really interesting about that is so the other thing is I'd love to extend the conversation out to smaller groups and communities, where people can make sense of their needs and their careers and navigating things. Because I think I was talking to someone last night and who's also just doing her yoga exam. And, I was asking her, because I was struggling with this, what makes me feel joyful? What makes you feel joyful? And what I realized was the things that, so she was like, really, like, I want to travel and I want to go to really dodgy communities in South America and then buy project, she was just like really, really different to me. And I thought, I felt almost guilty for saying, I really like a really nice cup of coffee and I want to take a really slow walk in nature.
That's exactly that. No, I just wanted to add, because I had a very similar experience. I can't. Well, in fact, in my own childhood, I've been asked the same question, and I was just ashamed to answer what it really was. I was just computer programming, to be honest. But in fact, I was ashamed to answer because maybe I was ashamed to admit it to myself. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe we just need to, like I did prior to this conversation, like in this joyous, voice, scream about, like, this is it. This is what I really want. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not ashamed of it, whatever it might be.
And it was so cute because you came on the call and you were like, look at my new piano. And the whole way through this conversation, I'm sure our listeners can hear, there's like a really fizzy energy, like an excited energy in you about what you're talking about.
But this happens because of the space we're creating here, Vanessa, for ourselves in this conversation and our listeners. And I think if I'm at work, it's a good one, because when I'm with my client and someone that I report to, And we do have deep conversations. And the person is coming back from vacation next week. Will I be able to have the same energy and I won't have my, keyboard with me to say, hey, I've been picking up this and that. And obviously there's so much going on. But I will say that. I even told that to people that I work with. I'm not afraid of saying it. I'm, sounding weird. Maybe it's not necessarily weird that I'm learning to produce electronic music. But for me, it's like, well, what do I have to lose? Why should I be ashamed? I don't care anymore. In my ripe old age and grey beard, I was like, flip it, right? It's like it's I've got only so much of my life, and I'm spending it with these people. So if I'm not willing to share the fact that there's something that excites me, what's the point?
I love that. So what can we leave our listeners with?
Be the leader that creates the space for people to be joyous about their hobbies, their purposes in life, and appreciate that, because this will help them deliver it. And if they're not talking about it, well, think about what is it that prohibits that. So that's
amazing.
Now, come, Vanessa, you can add something.
Yeah, I would add, and as an individual, just ask yourself, if you're someone who is really attached to success looking like a certain way, just stop and question that a little bit, and just notice that maybe your model of success isn't your own. It's one that you've been handed, and that just awareness gives you such a lot of freedom to play and explore.
All right. Good luck.